This is Jess Phillips. She's a British Member of Parliament for the Labour Party and has been since 2015. Phillips is the definition of a career politician. She describes her childhood as politically active. She once stated that growing up with her father was like growing up with Jeremy Corbyn, the Soviet-sympathizing former leader of the Labour Party. She attended the University of Leeds in 2000 in a social policy program, and in 2011 she went back to school, this time to the University of Birmingham, for public sector management. In between, she worked at her parents' healthcare company and also for the Women's Aid Federation of England. In 2012, she was elected to the Birmingham City Council. All in all, her life up until she became MP seemed to focus specifically on politics, and it was all in order to get her into that chair. She had a childhood dream of becoming Prime Minister, and everything she's done has served to further that goal. Let's be honest, none of you guys know or care about any of that, right? You all know who Jess Phillips is, because Sargon said back in 2016, "I wouldn't even rape you." That's one of the big reasons people know Jess Phillips for. And hell, it's one of the big reasons people know Sargon for too. This magical statement, "I wouldn't even rape you," has been reposted countless times across the internet, often mangled and misattributed as a genuine rape threat, which it obviously wasn't. Probably the most mimetic version of it is Sargon's internet-appointed title as the UKIP Rape Man, due to that phrase spiking as a search term in 2019. Let's go back to the source though. The reason anyone knows about the phrase "I wouldn't even rape you" is because when Sargon posted one of his videos to Twitter, he posted it with that description, pointing at Jess Phillips' Twitter account along with the hashtags anti-rape threats and feminism is cancer. The video in question is an episode of This Week in Stupid from May 29th, 2016, and while Sargon scrubbed all of his old content off of his channels, I've still got a copy of the video, so let's take a look at the context.
It's not the viciousness of attacks I get on the internet that bothers me. People talking about raping me isn't fun, but has become somewhat par for the course. Well, I'll tell you what, Jess, I think that's terrible. And you know what? I wouldn't even rape you. I wouldn't even rape you. Not even.
That is very clearly an edgy throwaway line, and not an actual rape threat. It's meant to make the audience laugh. Maybe he's shitting on Jess Phillips for not being all that attractive, frankly. You can call it rude and crude, and it is, but people who think this is a real rape threat are delusional. Also, as an aside, it's actually pretty amazing watching this old video, because you can really tell that Sargon's changed over the years. He's anti-Islam in the video like he is today, sure, but he's also still very solidly a liberal in this video, while he's absolutely a conservative nowadays. That's fine, by the way. It's been 8 years. People change. It's completely normal. Now, I'm gonna be honest with you guys. I still find the joke funny 8 years later. I am still an edgelord myself. I like making people shit themselves by poking at their sacred cows, if you haven't noticed. This video isn't me attacking Sargon. I understand why Jess Phillips was upset about the comment. She has every right to be, but I am not Jess Phillips. And when it comes to edgy jokes in the public square, I tend to fall on the side of respecting somebody's free speech rights. I went back and grabbed that article of Phillips's from 2016 that Sargon was commenting on. Reclaim the internet, fighting for freedom of speech. I'm not gonna go over it like Sargon did, but it's easy enough to find if you want to read it yourself. Her argument here basically is, being anonymous on the internet ruins free speech because it amplifies the heckler's veto. If you say something online that people don't like, and there's a ton of random accounts screaming at you in the replies, that's shouting you down, that's intimidation, that's harassment. And okay, on some level I get the point, but my response to that is the same that I've said every other time, including when it's happened to me. Use the block and mute buttons, that's what they're there for. The most you can say is that the people coming at you are stupid, and you should block or mute them, and then move on. But if you want to take them off the internet or see them arrested because you disagree with them, that's ridiculous. Now, there's little point in actually rehashing this 8-year-old article, but I do want to take us down a path starting from here. 1 week later, The Times published an article about the whole event. Apparently, Jess Phillips received tons of messages saying "I wouldn't even rape you" from Sargon's followers, who were obviously setting up to troll her. She said on Twitter that she got 600 notifications about her rape in one night, and that Twitter was broken for her. Hey, listen, 2016 Jess Phillips, you ain't seen nothing yet on that Twitter being broken front, just wait a few more years. But Sargon replied with what everyone was thinking. Saying you won't rape someone is not talking about your rape, it's the opposite. And this is how the conversation would repeat itself many times over the years. Some weirdo soy leftoid would come out and exclaim that Sargon made rape threats when he obviously didn't. These people would get corrected and laughed at, rinse and repeat. Now, as for why Sargon has such a low opinion of Jess Phillips in the first place, I think it stems back from this interaction here, where on International Men's Day, Jess Phillips laughed at the idea that men might also face gender-specific problems.
Because, of course, not only do we have International Women's Day, we also have women and equality questions every month in the Chamber, which we don't have for men. So the opportunity for men to raise issues that are important to them is very limited. And just to give you a flavour, Mr. Chairman, of the type of things that may come up and which will be part of International Men's Day. I'm not entirely sure why it's so humorous, but to discuss issues such as men's shorter life expectancy, wider male health issues, many of which go unreported through embarrassment of men to sort of go along and talk about these things.
You have to excuse me for laughing, that the idea that men don't have the opportunity to ask questions in this place is a frankly laughable thing. As I say, as the only woman on this committee, it seems like every day to me is.
Well, I wasn't making, with respect, I wasn't making that point. I wasn't making the point that men don't have an opportunity to ask. I was about men's issues. There's a very big difference between men raising issues and the raising of men's issues.
That's pretty disgusting on behalf of Jess Phillips, but it's not like all the stuff sent her way was only messages that said I wouldn't even rape you. According to her, there was also stuff that was significantly more direct.
A huge torrent of attacks from men's rights activists on Twitter and through my email, and then just in the evening, on Thursday evening, somebody emailed me sort of screenshots of people saying really, really awful things about me, that they wanted to rape me, bind and gag me, pour molten metal over me. Really awful things.
I think that last one's a Game of Thrones reference. The show was still good back then, but still, point taken. The issue I have with all of this is, I'm pretty sure that at least some of this was Jess Phillips playing up a victimhood narrative. She is a victim of sexual assault, which is obviously horrible, but I think she also gave an interview, which unfortunately is now lost to time, maybe someone will post it in the comments, where she said that she was in her garden with her family when Sargon sent that tweet, and she didn't really notice or even care all that much about the messages being sent her way. It didn't even drop on her radar until several days later. To me, it's really hard to claim that victim status when you're so nonplussed about it. Don't take my word for this though, since I can't actually find the interview that I remember seeing back in the day. I'm sure at least a few of you guys remember it though. The wider conversation here is about rhetoric. Jess Phillips' argument seems to be that mocking rape is not only terrible, but should have some sort of legal punishment attached to it. Not simply social shaming for being rude, but the state should step in and enforce some standard of speech upon you.
I mean, quite a lot of the stuff from people on Twitter, there will be nothing that the police can do about it because they seem largely to be not from the UK.
The logic for this sort of thing is usually some combination of I feel harassed and you're normalizing further, more extreme actions, even if you're joking. Frankly, I don't give a shit about the first one. Like I said earlier, that's what the block button is for. But let's discuss the second one. A year earlier in 2015, when Jess Phillips said that she wouldn't backstab Jeremy Corbyn, but instead would knife him in the front, I'm pretty sure we can all figure out this isn't a real stabbing threat, despite the UK's knife crime problem. Jess Phillips is not actually going to plunge a kitchen knife into Jeremy Corbyn's chest. This is a rhetorical flourish. What she's saying is, if Jeremy Corbyn hurts the Labour Party, I won't work behind closed doors and scheme to remove him as leader. I will openly and directly challenge his leadership and critique his actions in public view, regardless of party unity. In much the same way, Jess probably took Sargon's I wouldn't even rape you comment as a rhetorical flourish, as containing hidden meaning, though in this case the meaning would be more violent than the words, not less. Nonetheless, Sargon's denied that interpretation of his words multiple times over the years.
I would like to ask Carl Benjamin why you think it is acceptable to say on Twitter that you wouldn't even rape a female Labour MP.
Because I don't think women are any different to men in the way that we should treat them. Unlike the establishment, unlike our judges who literally say if you were a man, I would have sent you to jail, I think we should treat women the same as men. And that means if a woman is being a giant and laughing at male suicide, I'm going to be a giant back to her. Any questions?
So it's acceptable?
Yes.
It is acceptable to joke about raping a woman?
100% deal with it.
There is an interesting discussion here, the interplay between legitimate dog whistling and just being edgy. It's often hard to tell when a person is saying a thing and directly meaning it, versus a person saying a thing but actually alluding to some underlying meaning not fully present in the statement, versus a person saying a thing knowing their audience will see some underlying meaning, but not actually intending to say that underlying meaning, and using that disconnect as a joke. That third one is a pretty common form of trolling online. But this is a story that just doesn't die. When I mentioned earlier that UKIP rape man spiked as a search term in 2019, it was due to Sargon joining UKIP and running for a European parliamentary seat. Jess Phillips immediately came out to say that he should be banned from running for public office due to his 2016 joke. In response, on the campaign trail, Sargon said this.
There's been an awful lot of talk about whether I would or would not even rape Jess Phillips. I've been in a lot of trouble for my hardline stance of not even raping her. I suppose with enough pressure I might cave. But let's be honest, nobody's got that much beer.
Well, that's one way to double down. This is clearly a joke, you can tell by the way he's saying it, but we all know how it was taken.
I want to ask you, why did you decide to choose rape when talking about Jess Phillips?
I'm interested in why you're deliberately misrepresenting what's happened. Have you seen the video in question?
Of course, yes.
Right, and how would you describe that video?
Why did you decide to choose
Well, no,
rape?
it's
when
very
talking
important
about
because
Jess
you've been
Phillips?
lying about me and I've been attacked in the street because of your lies. So
We-
this is genuinely
I've
important.
never lied about you, and you're here
You
today.
have. A lie by omission is still a lie. And in your last segment about me with Jess Phillips, you did not mention that this was a comedy video.
At roughly the same time, Jess, along with many other Labour MPs, were under fire, that's rhetorical by the way, due to a prolonged bout of shitting themselves after Boris Johnson's election and Brexit finally moving forward. There were lots of mean comments, many of which were pointedly more violent than anything Sargon's ever said. But also one guy was arrested for smacking on her office window and screaming fascist. He was arrested for a public order offense, which to be honest could apply to either the window smacking or the rhetoric, knowing the UK. And it's always going to be funny to me, considering how many people Jess Phillips has baselessly called a fascist or a Nazi over the years, that there was a guy who might have got arrested for calling her a fascist back. By the end of 2019, Jess Phillips' front knifing of Jeremy Corbyn came to fruition as she ran for leadership of the party. She didn't really get off the ground, but it was pretty hilarious to see her say that she wanted to fill Parliament with IKEA furniture. Those Swedes are taking our jobs, guys. When Labour lost in 2019, Jess stated her belief that it was because Corbyn pulled the party too far to the left.
Was it Brexit? Was it Jeremy Corbyn? Was it that the party came up with policies that were too far to the left? Was it all of those things?
It was all of those things and many other things, and if we think that we can do like a listicle checklist of what went wrong and just come up with a listicle checklist of what we have to do next time for it to be right, we will inevitably end up in an even worsening position. And the Labour Party is now on its fourth election defeat. It hasn't won a general election since 2005. This is not a time for easy answers as much as I wish it was. I wish there was some silver bullet, but I also wish I was a size 10.
A belief that was at least in part confirmed by Labour's decisive win in 2024 after the party moved towards the centre. But among the UK's angry anarchist left, the name Jess Phillips briefly became a slur to describe pragmatic neoliberals who had betrayed the revolution, because the revolution lost at the ballot box, and none of these chucklefucks have the backbone necessary to order a pizza over the phone without having a panic attack, let alone actually march in the streets and try to seize power. Eventually, cancel culture came for Jess Phillips herself, as it comes for all of us. Despite all of her advocacy, her feminist credentials, all of it, she was accused of racist and bullying behavior in 2023. I'll lay out the accusation on screen, you can pause and read it if you like. But to me, it actually looks and sounds similar to what happened between Sargon and Jess back in 2016. Catherine Burblesing, I don't know how to fucking pronounce that, colloquially known as Britain's strictest headmistress, documented the messages she was sent by the followers of Jess Phillips. And while there's no "I wouldn't even rape you" stuff in here, there are calls to have the headmistress investigated and stripped of her job. Why? Well, it seems to be because Catherine is a conservative, and also not white, making her a traitor. Though I fully admit I might be missing some context here. This is just how it reads to me. A couple of months ago, Sargon's company, the Lotus Eaters, interviewed Liz Truss, the former Prime Minister of the UK. Sargon didn't interview her himself. Connor did. But that didn't matter to Jess Phillips. She thought any mainstream connection to the UKIP rape man was unacceptable, and she tried to pressure Rishi Sunak into expelling Truss from the party. Here we are, 8 years later, and she still has not let the joke go. Also, dude, why is this letter so dark? My point is, Jess is exactly the type to deploy cancel culture against the people she hates, repeatedly. But when it comes for her, it's an unfair backlash, it's misogyny or whatever. In a previous video, I showed off that clip from the recent election, where she won her seat, but the Muslim men in her constituency, this is Birmingham after all, were angry that a woman was in a position of authority over them.
A very close thing for Jess Phillips. She's just scraped in. Indeed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So we're going to continue with the class that we had during the campaign. It's all right. The election that I have... I will carry on with my speech. I understand that a strong woman standing up to you is met with such reticence. Anyway, this election has been... Can you throw them out?
Excuse me. Before we have our first speeches, that's fine.
This election has been the worst election I have ever stood in.
And you know what? I'm on Jess's side here. This shit shouldn't be happening. But you live by mob rule, you die by mob rule. However, a few weeks ago, Sargon finally decided to apologize to Jess Phillips.
There's been a real change in British politics recently. And Jess Phillips herself, I think, really highlighted this at her acceptance speech for her victory in the latest election, in which she pointed out that there's been severe coarsening in British politics. And honestly, it really struck a chord with me, because I felt that, well, that's obviously true. She was putting on a very brave face about these things, and in other media interviews afterwards, she explained that, or she was trying to explain that she wasn't intimidated, but I think it was evident that she was. The issue has been the injection of foreign sectarian politics and the liberal principles that underpinned British political life no longer obtain. When I insulted Jess Phillips, and I was horrifically rude, and I'll properly apologise for that in a minute, it was against the background of stable English political life, in which it was obvious to everyone involved that when she was calling me various names like a misogynist or whatever, and I was insulting towards her, it was evident that it was only just going to be words. That's all it was ever going to be. And I don't think that's evident with what's happening now, and I'm really concerned about it. And I think that both myself and Jess have contributed to this atmosphere of political coarsening. I've become a father many times over. I've got myself a good education now, and I'm a business owner. And I look around now at the man I was then, and I think about the man I am now, and all of the responsibilities that I have, and the kind of social fabric we're living in. And I realized that, yes, I was contributing to this. So it is without any kind of reservation that I'd like to say that I am sorry to Jess Phillips, and I shouldn't have made such a rude and obviously offensive statement. And if she would like me to apologize in person, I'm more than happy to do so. And I'm not going to explain, what, or make any kind of excuse for that. It was just wrong, and I shouldn't have done it. And I'd like to, frankly, present a better example to my sons as they grow older.
As far as I can tell, there's no word on if she's accepted the apology. I imagine she won't. Sargon's logic here is twofold. One, he wants to set a better example for his kids, and two, British politics has become a lot harsher since 2016. Back then, there was no chance Sargon would ever actually hurt Jess Phillips, and it's ridiculous to think so. But is there a chance that those Muslim men chanting against women holding power would? That is certainly much more plausible. You know what? Sargon's right. Whenever I talk to my UK friends, they all tell me it's become a harsher and colder place. As legitimate political violence rises in the Western world, it probably actually is the case that edgy jokes about political violence that are not serious have less and less of a place. And that sucks, because I love edgy jokes. The problem ultimately is not people like Sargon, the tellers of the edgy jokes, at least not in this case. The problem is the people who would actually do the violent action that is only being joked about. Do the jokes help normalize those real positions? Of course they do, but it's not just that. When you're an advocate for more immigration from cultures that don't have the same values regarding rape or political violence or women holding power, you also cause the problem. The UK's former Home Secretary said that the Tories were too squeamish to deal with immigration properly, in fear of being called racist, and that the support for immigration is a luxury belief. I've spoken about luxury beliefs on my channel before. The idea is that you express political beliefs that are considered to be moral, but nonetheless have downsides. However, because you're well off, you'll never have to personally suffer those downsides, so it's safe for you to express those beliefs. To use the immigration example, immigration is a luxury belief because it's considered moral. You're compassionately helping these poor people who just want a better life. But the downsides of immigration, driving down the price of labor for low-skilled workers, ghettoization, possible ethnic strife, these are things that the upper class don't have to experience. So upper-class people can safely advocate for immigration, reaping the reward of appearing more moral in public and pushing off the negative effects of the policy down to the lower classes. Well, for Jess Phillips anyway, this luxury belief has hit its breaking point. It was very easy to advocate for large amounts of immigration from places in the world that do not share the same political or cultural values as the UK, when the worst thing you had to deal with was Sargon saying on Twitter he wouldn't even rape you. But in 2024, those immigrants are now so numerous and their values so alien to Jess's own that they have finally come into direct conflict. We are now reaching a point where the lower layer of the upper class will have to actually experience the downsides of the policies they've been promoting for 20 years, and not only in the UK. Let's see if it will finally make them change their mind.